G'day there, trendsetters. Just wanted to wish you all a Shana Tova. Wishing you a good year filled with revealed good at all that you do for yourselves, your family, your loved ones, the whole world, the animals, the planet, everybody. So we're coming to Rosh Hashana, which is the Jewish New Year. It's falling out Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday this year. So it's going to be a beautiful time for all of us to spend time with family, spend time maybe in synagogue, connecting, reevaluating the year that was and the year and future that will be. If you're looking for a place and you don't have a place, I would suggest going to a Chabad house somewhere. You know, look on chabad.org, chabad.org. Maybe you could find a synagogue that you could go to, and you could definitely hook yourself up with a place there to pray and a place there to get a meal. Sorry, let me just get rid of that. So I just wanted to share a couple ideas as we come to this momentous event in the year on veganism and how it affects, interacts, I think, with Judaism in terms of the moral basis for it. So I think a lot of people will come and say that animals shouldn't be eaten. Why? Because they're sentient beings, and us humans, we are sentient beings, and that's the common denominator. We are the same, and therefore the same way you wouldn't want to eat a human being, you shouldn't want to eat a lamb. And there's definitely an argument there. There's definitely something there. But I think a Jewish perspective is actually the opposite of that. And it's and this is my interpretation, and that it's not about that animals and human beings are the same and therefore there's an obligation to care for each other. I think in Judaism and also in a general legal precedent, there's an idea of inequality. And when there's inequality and a difference in stature or a difference in status, that's where an obligation arises. And we see this idea, particularly in Judaism and the Torah, where we have an obligation to protect the most vulnerable members of society precisely because there's inequality. And those people are widows, converts, and orphans. Those people are particularly vulnerable because of society. They're particularly vulnerable to manipulation, to being extorted, to being used and abused. And therefore God comes and says, I put upon you a particular obligation that you shouldn't abuse them and you shouldn't exploit their vulnerabilities, and you have to go out of your way to care for them. And same too, animals are particularly vulnerable against us humans, precisely because of the inequality of power and our sophistication, our ability to communicate. Kabbalistically speaking, there are four kind of hierarchies of life. The bottom is doimim, the inanimate, that's the ground, which is actually the highest because that sustains everything. That's a Kabbalistic kind of thing, that the highest falls the lowest is the highest. If you have a wall that falls down, the highest point falls the lowest. We could get into tangents there, we won't go there. So we got domem, then we got soimeach, which is the sprouting, literally vegetation. That's one level above that, but again, that's very high because when you think about it, the earth sustains the vegetation sustains animal and human life. And then we have chaye, literally life, which is the animal kingdom, and then we have medaber, which is the human species. And the thing that separates us from the animals is our medaber, our ability to speak, to communicate. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities between animal and human. The one thing that differentiates us particularly is the ability to communicate and perhaps intellect. Rabbi Sachs would say it, we are meaning-seeking creatures. We have the ability to communicate and ask why and what. What am I here for? So with that ability to speak, to communicate, to ask what are we here for, comes obligation, because we have tremendous power and therefore tremendous power over others. That gives an obligation to safeguard that and to limit that, and to limit our abuse and effect to those creatures and beings and the planet that is vulnerable to our abuse. And we see that in law. We have in secular law, particularly in the West, in Australia, what would you call it? Common law, which is based on English origins. We have this thing called equity in law, which kind of fills in the gaps, which might not be in legislation, in statute, or case law. They kind of fill in the gaps for the general vibe of being good law. And one of those things is called fiduciary duty. And that is where somebody like a professional, particular financial advisor or legal practitioner, they have an unequal level of expertise, an unequal level of power, therefore, over a client who comes over to them. They can abuse them because of that power, their knowledge, their abilities, their connections, and therefore they have a fiduciary duty, a special duty to not stuff around the client. So too, I think that's like a kind of a precedent, if you will, a mashal, if you will, an allegory for our obligation to the planet and to the animals. We have tremendous power to do harm, and therefore we have an obligation not to do harm. So just coming, that's one of the ideas of Rosh Hashana, is that we're celebrating, as it were, the birth of mankind, where we had this creation, we had something coming from nothing. We all agree. The Big Bang is that first there was nothing, then there was a universe. We have a universe. We have human beings who have the ability to ask why. We are here for a purpose. One of the purposes in the Torah, coming from Genesis, is we were put on this planet, we were put in the Garden of Eden, as it were, le'ovdo or l'shamro, to work it, to serve it, and to safeguard it. And I think, as we come into Rosh Hashanah, we've got to evaluate, what are we doing to serve the planet, and what are we doing to safeguard the planet? And by the planet, I don't mean only the animals and the plants. I also mean the planet involving also the human beings. This comes to another idea of veganism and the ethics of veganism, is that the ethics of veganism is how we interact with the planet and how we interact with the animals is beautiful. But that's only one aspect of our morality. It's only one aspect of our interaction with the planet. How are we to our fellow human beings? It's very easy to get upset about Cecil the lion and Harambe the gorilla. I think, because no gorilla's ever, not called you on your birthday. No gorilla's ever let you down as a friend. It's much harder to love human beings, and that's because we can do harm to each other more, or upset each other, or break each other's hearts more. A dog really can't break your heart so much. So it's a lot easier to be kind to animals. It's a lot harder to be kind to human beings, especially. It's always, as it says, the cobbler's children have no shoes. It's always hard to put in the effort to the people who are closest to us. So we need to put in that effort to our relationships. We have two forms of service. We have the service between us and God. I think that encompasses the planet, our obligation to safeguard it and keep it. We also have our interactions between us and our fellow human being, our fellow medaber, our fellow communicator. And I think bringing that idea that the obligation of veganism, in my opinion, from Judaism, stems from the inequality between human and animal, and the human and plant life, and our obligation to safeguard it. But I think we have a parallel obligation, of course, to fellow human beings, and I think that's a harder obligation, and therefore an obligation with greater reward, because the reward is commensurate to the effort. It's easy to just eat tofu. It's a bit harder to pick up the phone and reach out to somebody and offer them some love and affection, especially if they've maybe let you down in the past, and not bear a grudge. So that is our obligation coming into the year. And I wish us all blessings and success in all of our endeavors, especially these ones. We're going to have to reflect this Rosh Hashanah. The New Year is not only about partying. There's a bit of partying, a bit of a celebration, but it's also solemn introspection and planning for the future. And so I wish you all fantastic and profitable planning in all of your endeavors, all of our endeavors. And that's it. I want us all to stay kosher, stay vegan. Share your thoughts on this. I'm sorry I've been making videos. Very busy. Lots of kids, slichas, dishwashers, work, businesses, all kinds of things. So I apologize, but I'm enjoying it, because this is all God's garden. We've got to remember that it's all one. It's all one universe. A lot of people say there's difference. Keep your spirituality in the home. I want to say it's all spiritual. The dishes are spiritual. My work is spiritual. Praying is spiritual. Being with my wife and kids is spiritual. It's all spiritual. So I think that's the idea of living a spiritual life, is rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, digging in the garden, dealing with the weeds, watering the plants, plowing, planting. This is our life. To work it and to safeguard it. Yalla, stay by. Stay Shana Tova. Stay kosher. Stay vegan. See you, bye.